Hello and welcome to Take Me Home, the podcast offering a social democratic alternative for the politically homeless. I'm Hilary.salt.
And I'm Sebastian.Moore.
And we are in temporary SDP towers today, aren't we?
Temporary accommodation.
Yeah. Whilst we wait for perhaps something a bit more permanent.
And this is a bit of a test because we've had to set all of the equipment up, so let's hope it goes well.
Yes, fingers
Otherwise,
crossed.
this won't make the light of day.
Indeed, yeah.
Now, I think we're starting off a new year,
Yep.
2026. It's already been a very exciting start to the year politically.
It has, lots going on.
So I would like to do a quick summary and a quick roundup of Trump, basically, just Trump.
Okay.
Everything that's going on with that.
Yes, yeah.
But sort of international geopolitics.
Okay.
Although geopolitics makes it sound quite complicated and confusing, whereas Trump, it doesn't feel like geopolitics. It just feels like smash politics.
You just don't know what you're going to wake up to every day, do you?
That's it.
What new madness.
And what do you plan on talking about?
I wanted to talk a little bit about fertility rates, just because it seems to be something that everybody's starting to panic about now. And I think there is a bit of misunderstanding on some of the technicalities. So I want to do a little bit of a teaching on fertility rates, but also just to talk a bit more widely about whether this kind of numbers, concentration on the numbers of people is all that matters.
Okay, excellent. Can I start off then?
Yes, why don't you? Yes.
So I'm breaking it down as Venezuela, Greenland, and Iran.
Okay.
I think those are the three big topics. Now, we didn't do a podcast last week, but if we had, I'd have talked about Venezuela.
Yes.
I can't even think when, everything's moving so fast. It was about 10 days ago now that Nicolas Maduro was kidnapped.
Yeah.
Which I still struggle to say with a straight face because it just seems so ludicrous. It seems so surreal to me.
Yeah.
That when I saw that news, it was a real, what would you call that? Like a dream, where you think, oh, I'm going to wake up in a second.
Yeah, more a nightmare, I think, no?
Well, it depends on the way you see it, but the US have kidnapped the president of Venezuela. I thought, how is that right? How does that add up? So he's now in custody in New York. And obviously there's been some repercussions to that, and people are now worried about Greenland.
Yes.
That's the second sort of element of this. Trump made it clear in 2019 that he had some aspirations of taking Greenland for his own, for the US. But really it wasn't until this term, and Trump, and I think this is a remarkable thought that doesn't quite sound right, but Trump hasn't been in power for a year.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So he still hasn't gone over a year.
Okay.
For this second term. And he's done a lot in 1 year, whether you like him or not.
Yeah.
So yeah, that people are worried that he is wanting to conquer Greenland, and the EU are quite concerned because he said that he wouldn't rule out a military takeover. Mm. That has had some repercussions in terms of how NATO could be affected, which I think is a fascinating element to this.
Because Greenland is part of Denmark, effectively.
Exactly,
isn't it?
yeah, which is part of NATO.
Yeah.
So it would be an attack from one NATO country on another, thus somehow triggering Article 5, which says that an attack on one NATO country is an attack on all, and the other NATO countries should come to the defence of the others, a bit like we did when America was attacked in 9/11.
Yeah.
And then the third thing, and this is somewhat related, but there have been these mass protests in Iran, and they started off as cost of living protests, so at the end of December, and they have spread to various parts of the country, and there's many, many different cities now all over Iran where they're seeing people protesting in the streets. And just in the last couple of days, we're getting reports now that the regime have cracked down violently, as was sort of to be expected. The reports are that hundreds of people have been killed, and Trump has now said today, we're recording this on Tuesday the 13th, of January, Trump has said that he will not rule out using force against Iran.
Yeah.
So that's another area, another country, another sphere. If you've got the Arctic, the South America, and sort of Middle East, Near East, it's another sphere where Trump and American foreign policy in this new world order is starting to have consequences.
There are ties between Venezuela and Iran, aren't there? They have.
I don't know how strong those ties are, but yeah, I mean Venezuela with the Maduro regime had close ties supposedly to Russia, China, and Iran. So sort of the natural opponents of the US and
Yeah.
the sort of liberal West, and so that plays into this. And Trump, I mean, a lot of the reasoning behind what America did in Venezuela. People are citing the Monroe Doctrine. You know about the Monroe Doctrine?
But they keep saying Dunro
Well,
doctrine now, don't
because-
they? Which I'm not sure that works.
No, but Trump obviously is. He wouldn't shy away from the possibility of his name coming into a news story. So he's terming it the Donroe Doctrine.
Yeah.
But the Monroe Doctrine was this this idea that the Western Hemisphere should be it should be the I was going to say the remit of the countries in the Western Hemisphere, not the European
sphere
countries.
of influence.
Yeah, sphere of
Yes.
influence.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was particularly relevant at the time of James Monroe because we had sort of colonial powers, Spain, France, the UK, that were all had possessions in the Western Hemisphere. That's not the case now.
Yeah.
So, yes, the Donroe Doctrine, it's a new way of interpreting foreign policy.
But if you're allowed to intervene in your sphere of influence, then presumably Russia's allowed to intervene in Ukraine in its sphere of influence.
Yeah, and I mean, as with a lot of foreign policy, a lot of this stuff is arbitrary.
Yeah.
You say, okay, you're allowed to intervene in the Western Hemisphere. Why the Western Hemisphere and not, if you think about the US, it's as far from the south of Argentina as it is from, Europe. So it's like, why couldn't it get involved in Europe in that case? It doesn't necessarily make sense. But then I don't think these foreign policy things need to make sense. I think a lot of the time countries are crafting arguments as a reason to further their own interests.
Yes, yeah. Can we just go back to Iran for a minute?
Yes.
So you said that the protests were about cost of living, which is what the BBC is saying.
Yeah.
I just think that actually underestimates the extent to which they're about people rebelling against the situation that they're in, particularly women. And there's a really big contingent of women involved in the protests, burning hijabs and things like that. So I just question whether blaming it on the cost of living protest is actually quite right.
Yeah, I don't think it's a case of blaming it on the cost of living. I think it's these sorts of mass protests when you're dealing with an authoritarian regime, they require a clear motive or a clear initial motive to mobilise the population, which then often morphs into something else. I mean, if you look at Romania when it was under Ceausescu, those protests started off as a very, very niche thing. They were trying to expel the state was trying to expel this Hungarian priest over in Timișoara.
Oh, I remember, yes.
Yeah, in the west of the country. I've been to his house actually, where he lives.
Right.
And a few locals came out in support of this priest, saying, no, you should stay. And then that sort of suddenly managed to trigger off these mass protests all over the country, and it ended in the fall of Ceausescu and ultimately being killed, sentenced to death. Anyway, going back to Iran, I think that's what we see is that clearly, I know I'm going to be looking through this through the lens of my Western liberal bias, but clearly it's a very authoritarian regime, which oppresses particularly women, and there will be a lot of animosity towards that regime, and it won't take much for people to want to express that.
Yeah.
But you do need something. You need an initial spark. I mean, we saw this with the Mahsa Amini, to say her name right. She was the woman that was killed by the police.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who was protesting with who didn't have a hijab on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if I've got the exact facts there right, but something like that. That was the trigger, and I think at the moment there's the trigger because the cost of living has risen sharply. And in some ways, I think a lot of these dictatorships, they want something like the ability for people to get by goes. So that once the prices of things increase, the sentiment then is, oh, even that they can't do right.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the point in living under an authoritarian regime if they can't even give us
the
cheap
trains run on time.
Yeah, make the trains run on time, right?
Yeah.
So that's really interesting, and I think a friend of mine I was talking to, her family's over there, and she's really worried about them because she hasn't heard from them. The internet is completely out. As always is the case when there's protests, the government cut everybody's access to the internet.
Yeah.
I think it'll be really interesting to see what Trump does, what America does. I think we've learned a few things in the 2 weeks since the new year has rolled in, that America. I mean, you hear a lot of people say America's no longer going to be the global policeman, and I sort of think I understand what people are saying by that. They're not going to be the arbiter and maintain the liberal international order, but they are sort of exhibiting elements of being the policeman more so than we've seen in a long, long time.
It's weird, isn't it? So we thought he was going to be less interventionist, and actually he's being significantly more interventionist.
And perhaps I don't know what your take on the Maduro thing is. I presume you're quite against it.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Okay.
Just because of sovereignty and self-determination, and you can't just go into another country and decapitate the president. They keep saying, don't they? But to me, that says cut his head off.
Yeah, I suppose it's decapitating the office.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think an advocate of Trump's, or somebody that was in favour of this, would say that he is acting in a way that is not just furthering the interests of Americans, but intervening in a minimal way in order to reduce the need to intervene more maximally in the future.
Okay.
I don't know how much that argument holds.
And why does he need to intervene? Because there seems to be a lot of false assumptions around, like it's something to do with drugs, and actually most of the drugs come from other places. It's something to do with oil. Actually, it's quite hard to extract the oil that is in Venezuela. So why is Venezuela a danger to the US?
I think you're posing a question which is basically what's Donald Trump thinking, like what's in his mind, which is a dangerous question because I don't know if there's necessarily a thought out reason for this. I think it plays into this idea that the Trump regime, let's call it that, the administration, if we're being a little bit more polite, they have this sense of we can do what we like. We're the big boys in town. And I think a lot of Americans like that. They want, they like the fact that that they can see their government doing something. And I think in the case of Venezuela, I think people in Europe are perhaps blind to the idea that this could be a very popular thing, because Americans react to strength and they, positively, and they say, brilliant, we're actually going and we're doing something. And regardless of what you think about the sovereignty angle, it was an unbelievable operation. The fact that they managed to get in, no Americans died in the operation.
Yeah.
And they've just gone into it's not, like a tin pot dictatorship, right? Venezuela is, it's I was going to say relatively more stable than the potential examples out there. And yet they've managed to go into another country and steal the president.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing we used to be able to do, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. And if nothing else, and I don't mean to make light of this situation, I find it very funny, the whole thing. I know that I think you can sort of find it funny without necessarily laughing at the fact that, people are dying and there's all these real world consequences of foreign policy stuff. I think what I find funny about it is it's the surreal nature of it. It's almost quite Monty Python-esque or something.
Yeah.
And I think if nothing else, that there are positives, one of which is that it shows what a country can do, like America.
Yeah.
It shows them what they are capable of. And it really should make us rethink the way we do our foreign policy. And what's interesting is it's having the same effect on people that are over on this side of the spectrum or this side of the spectrum, which is to say we shouldn't necessarily be so tied to the US and we shouldn't be dependent on them militarily. I think that's really, really important. I think it's very dangerous when a country sacrifices its own military capability with the idea that they can actually do it very cheaply by getting America to back them up or, another ally, whoever that ally is, because you're not in control of them. You're not in control of what their voters decide
Agreed.
to pursue.
Yeah, yeah. You're not suggesting Britain goes and snatches somebody, though, are you? Well, have you got somebody in mind?
I don't know, give it a go. It is something. And there's a cohort of people out there who want to see something. I'm not saying, we should go and steal a president, but it's I think we've got too used to having this safety, security, international order, all of these things. And it's like, maybe countries should do things that are acting in, for them to act in their own interests.
Yeah.
I think it's a problem, the fact that the playing field is so one-sided. America is so strong militarily because they've been that global policeman.
Yeah.
But if they start to act in a slightly more partial or selfish way, suddenly it makes us realise how vulnerable we are. But I don't think that's a bad thing, as long as we recognise it. I mean, I was saying this to a friend the other day, that in some ways we realised these things when Russia went into Ukraine.
Yeah.
Okay, the old international peaceful order doesn't apply anymore. What have we done? It's been nearly 4 years. Yeah, it's coming up for 4 years next month of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We've had 4 years.
Yeah.
Have we done anything to really get a hold of the issue? And they keep talking about investment in the defence budget increasing.
Sorry, the dog is playing with the bone now. It's making a lot of noise.
Cracking timing.
Apologies.
Friday. Really good timing. But where's that money going to? Where's it being spent? Have we got a vision? Have we got an idea of what we want our defence and our foreign policy to look like?
It was odd, wasn't it, that we helped the Americans intercept that tanker?
Yes.
We can do that, but we can't stop boats in the channel. That seemed a bit weird to me.
Yeah. Friday's been dealt with.
Yes. Not in a bad way. Just
Fed.
giving her a tea. Yeah.
Fertility.
Fertility.
I don't know what the segue is from Trump to fertility.
I'm not sure what to go there. But yes, so there's a lot of worry and angst around fertility. So I thought it was worth just talking about it, just because I do think some of the panic is being overplayed. I just want to throw in a little bit of a twist at the end as well, just to just for interest. So measuring fertility is more tricky than you might imagine. So the most accurate way to measure fertility is to measure cohort fertility. So that measures the fertility at a time when a woman can no longer give birth, which might be somewhere around 45, something like that. That's another can of worms to open, but let's say for the moment it is 45. So at the moment, we can only measure the fertility of women who were born in 1980 because they've got to the end of their childbearing years. So
that, just to clarify, that's like when a woman is no longer able to have kids, you say, how many kids have you had?
Yes.
You count up all of the women.
Yeah.
And you divide that by the number of women there are to get an average number.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what do you think that number is for people that we can measure it?
But that's going back to women that were born in
1980.
1980.
Yeah. Late 70s, 80s.
1.6.
1.95.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
So it's nowhere near as low as people think it is for those people where we can properly measure it. That compares with, it was around about 2.04 for their mothers. So it has fallen, but not massively when you look at total cohort fertility at the end of a...
Okay, and it's hard to get your head around, I suppose, but those are not necessarily the kids that are being born now, because those kids
Yeah.
are being born. Friday is just determined for us to not record this podcast.
No.
The kids that are being born now, some of those will be being born to mums that are younger.
Correct, yes.
So it is slightly outdated data, basically.
Yes, you can only measure cohort fertility at the end of childbearing years. So it's a very long time lag before you can measure it.
Yeah.
But it is the accurate way to measure it. And when we do measure it that way for women born in the late 70s, early 80s, actually it has reduced fertility, cohort fertility, but not by that much.
Okay.
So the thing that has changed is the age at which women have their first child. So for the mothers of women having children now, their first child was born maybe around about 25, 26. Now it's age 31.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Well, the average age of a first-time mother?
Yeah.
Wow.
Much later. Yeah.
Okay.
Average, remember. Not all of them, but the average. So the age at which women have children is increasing. So the way that most people are measuring fertility rates when they talk about it now in terms of the panic is they're measuring something which we'd call the period total fertility rate. Now, what that does is it uses historical rates at which women gave birth at different ages and applies those rates to the split of women's ages in society now. So, for example, if there was a 20% likelihood that a woman would have a child at 27, you look at all the 27-year-olds, women in society now, multiply that by 0.2, and that's how many babies you expect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's applying historical rates to today's mix of ages. Now, that doesn't work very well when the age at which women have children is changing. Because you're applying, for example, a rate at which 33-year-olds had babies in the past to 33-year-old women now. Now, actually, we know that the age at which you have children is increasing. So using those historic age rates and applying them to today's age mix is perhaps not a very good way of measuring fertility. But that's the way that the measures that come out with numbers like 1.4 in
That's why I've got
England.
1.4.
Yeah, that's where that number comes from. Now, what I'm not saying is there isn't a problem, but what I am saying is that we don't actually yet know how much of a problem there is. Because if it's just that the people of your generation, people born in the mid-90s, if they're not having children in their 20s, they're having them in their 30s or even 40s, we don't yet know whether they will be having those children. We just know that they haven't had them yet. And it may be that what we're seeing is just a change in the age at which you have children. Which, interestingly, was a part of the explanation for the baby boom. The baby boom happened because people suddenly started having children at different ages to what they had before.
Earlier?
Well, both earlier and later, actually, because of the war and people coming back from the war, all those kind of things. So I just want to kind of put a bit of a caveat on this idea that fertility rates now are 1.4 because we don't really know what they are.
Can I just ask about that? Because when you explained this before at Battle of Ideas,
I did.
I remember the first time I'd heard these two ways of measuring fertility rate, and I hadn't considered this problem of the fact that you can't necessarily know how many children a woman is going to have.
Yeah.
And so you look at somebody that's, let's say a 30-year-old woman, and you say, well, 30-year-old women 30 years ago were having this number of children, whereas you've had 0 and she's had 1, and so on average you're having fewer, even though those 30-year-old women might go on to have loads of kids. We don't know.
Absolutely.
And I thought, well, surely there's a way of measuring it, and there can't be, can there?
We can't yet know. There are some things we can't know.
Is there not a way of weighting it so you can see how much later people are having their first child and then doing some sort of statistical analysis of that.
You could do, but that isn't what people are doing when they come out with the 1.4. They're just doing this very kind of rough idea.
That TFR,
yeah,
that rate, total fertility rate, that seems not just a poor metric, but just completely inaccurate in that case.
It is.
Why do we use it?
Because that's kind of the best we've got in terms of thinking about how we apply our experience of the past to the population of the present. But it's not the answer. It's an answer, but I think we should just be a bit wary of panicking about this 1.4 number. The other thing that I think is quite interesting is that people keep saying when they're talking about it, and it's far below replacement ratios, which are 2.1, but we've had fertility rates of below replacement ratios since the 1970s. This is not a new thing. And, it's just, I just think there's lots of panic going on, which doesn't really think carefully about, what we know and what we don't know. So, and the other thing that's interesting, I think, is there is a bit of a geographical difference. I think one of the things I told you about was that my son and his girlfriend who live in London came up last year to a friend's baby's christening. And I think they were really shocked that of my son's generation, so many of his friends now have one baby, two babies, they're very, very settled. Whereas in London, people just haven't, at that age, put down roots. So I think there's a bit of an anywheres and somewheres thing about this as well.
Which is?
So, this is David Goodhart's idea that there's kind of two groups of people, not good and bad, but just different, where some people perhaps remain settled in the place that they grew up and they're very rooted in their community, whereas others perhaps went away to university and kind of feel at home anywhere. And don't really have roots in the places that they live. So I think that's a bit of a difference as well. And a lot of the commentariat are the anywheres, who do see that kind of London experience or metropolitan experience, perhaps is a better way to put it.
It's the same reason why this recent trip to America that I did, I wanted to find Trump supporters and Republicans. Because I was in the deep south.
Yeah.
And so many of the people I came across were liberal, because I realised that I was coming across anywheres, whether it's in hostels, bars, the different events I went to. It's actually harder to find somewheres than the majority of the population, according to David Goodhart.
Yeah.
But they're not in the places where you're likely to see when you turn on the TV, listen to the radio.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm not saying is that there's not a problem. I think, we do need to be really conscious of the fact that younger people are finding it more difficult to, make their homes and start families. But I don't think we should be apocalyptic about it. And it's interesting, isn't it, that a few years ago people were saying, oh, we're too many people, we can't afford to feed them all. Yeah. And now they're saying, we're too few people, we can't afford to feed them all. It's really weird.
Yes.
And I think that numbers game is actually quite unhelpful. What's much more important is how productive society is. One of the things that people obsess about is the dependency ratio. So that's changed from about 5 people of working age to every pensioner down to 3. We'll probably go to 2. And people say that can't possibly be the case. We can't possibly have so many older people dependent on the working age population. But I think that misses 2 things. First of all, it misses the fact that many pensioners are very productive. They might not be being paid, but they'll be doing childcare for their children and their grandchildren. They'll be doing working down the park. They'll be doing all the kinds of things that older people do to support society. And the fact that some of them aren't getting paid doesn't necessarily make them dependent. And it also misses the fact that a lot of people of working age are not productive. So it's interesting that it's the same number, somewhere between 10 and 12 million of pensioners of children and of people in work who are not, of working age who are not working. Now, people only talk about the pensioners being a burden. And yet, nobody talks about the children being a burden. But economically, they are. We love to have them, of course.
Is that because there's a certain bias where it comes to the fact that children, they're seen as having a potential impact in the future, whereas pensioners aren't?
Yes,
It's like pensioners' contribution to the economy that's a historic thing now.
Yes, I think it's partly that. But I also think that there's a bit of particularly today, I think there is a bit of an extent to which older people are not valued in society. And partly because they are productive, but also partly because, they have a lot of life experience. I think we should value them much more. One of the things that I think people confuse is the difference between what you might call chronological ageing and biological ageing. So to be 65 today does not mean the same as it meant to be 65 in the 1950s or even the 1970s, because people get there much healthier.
Yeah.
And, it's the social, what it means socially to be that age has changed, quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people forget that as well when they just think about it. They think about every over 65 is an unproductive burden on society.
Yeah.
And that's just not true. In the same way that it's naturally not true that everybody under 65 is productive. Yeah. What we really need to concentrate on, I always say that this is productivity. If we had 1 or 2% per annum economic growth, we would easily be able to cope with higher levels of pensioners being dependent on the rest of society. And that's what we need to concentrate on, is growing the economy.
Growth comes from productivity.
Growth comes from productivity, not just numbers.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, that even at current levels of fertility, we wouldn't see a reduction in the levels of the population, even without immigration, because the population grows by the number of people born, less the number of people who die.
Yeah, people are living longer.
People are still living longer, yeah. So, we've got over that shock from the pandemic and people are now living longer.
I think demographics are one of the hardest things to get your head around because it deals with different time periods.
Correct.
I remember as a kid, it was always overpopulation that was the problem.
Yeah.
Everybody put everything down to overpopulation.
Yeah.
Every political problem.
Yeah.
This is why I'm very sceptical of one-size-fits-all political issues.
Yeah.
I think that's true for immigration. It's true for climate change. It's true for a lot of the issues that we're dealing with at the moment. And I remember listening to Hans Rosling. Have you ever come across Hans Rosling?
That doesn't ring any bells for me. No.
He was somebody he worked in. He was just like a Swedish academic that particular focus in sort of healthcare data and stuff, I believe. But he founded an organisation called Gapminder, which was its mission was to display data in a way that allowed people to understand it better. That makes sense.
Well,
There's
that sounds
some
good.
great website. I'll show you that after. So in fact, we could put a link in the episode. He actually died a few years ago, but he wrote a great book called Factfulness that you'd love.
Okay.
I might have it. I should give it to you.
Lend it me.
And he had this brilliant video where he explained how the overpopulation myth was just wasn't a problem because he said that if you go through the data and you look, and he used blocks which represented 1 billion people in the world, and he said you can clearly see that once this generation gets to this age, they will be living longer, which accounts for the increase in population, but that then it will plateau and we will plateau at about 10 or 11 billion people.
Yeah.
And suddenly he's sort of been proven right in the fact that nobody talks about overpopulation anymore.
That's
true. If anything, everybody's kind of suddenly switched to the other end.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, I promised you a twist at the end. Shall I throw the twist in?
The twist. We're all going to die.
No.
Okay.
We're all going to get married.
We're all going to get married?
Yeah. So, do you know of Taylor Swift?
I'm familiar with the musician that is Taylor Swift.
So she's not just a musician, she's also an influencer.
Uh-huh.
And she is getting married this year.
To Travis Kelce.
I think so, yes. Yeah.
I've seen it, unfortunately,
yes.
in the news.
Yeah. So, there's these companies who get paid to kind of think, what's the next mad thing that's going to happen in the world? I heard one on the radio the other day saying that because Taylor Swift is going to get married this year, marriage will become massively popular. And loads and loads and loads of young people will get married.
Okay.
So once that happens, who knows what will happen to fertility? We might have our next baby boom.
Because of Taylor Swift?
Yeah.
Okay. Taylor Swift might save humanity.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a bleak thought. Okay.
Yeah. So I did promise a twist. But I didn't see that one coming.
I really didn't.
Good.
Good.
Okay. Well, we've probably gone on for long enough, haven't we?
Yeah.
Whittled on there a little bit. Hopefully we will be recording again next week and maybe have a guest next week. We get back on in the routine of Take Me Home.
Exactly. Yeah.
As always, people, do recommend us to your friends. Do like us. Give us 5-star reviews because that really helps build the podcast. And we will see you again next time.
Thanks for listening.